Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Lenko Show. I am your host, Alex Lenkowski, and I am going to be joined today by coach and personal trainer and wrestler. Yes, we are talking wrestling, WWE style kind of shit. Liam Slater is going to be joining me on the show. So sit down, get comfortable, pin back your goals, and let's get stuck in. So here I am joined by Liam Slater, or Lazarus. I suppose we can refer you to that. Where did that name come from, first of all, Liam?
So the Lazarus name, basically, I started in wrestling as Liam Lazarus, and I wish I had like a cooler story for it. I wish it was like, oh, it has loads of meaning. I was basically reading a Batman book, and Ra's al Ghul uses the Lazarus pit as like the pit of like regeneration almost. And I was just reading it, I was like, Lazarus, that's alliteration, and it's got a Z in it, which is really cool. So that's the name that I'm going to use. And I've just been fortunate in that it sort of has a lot of meaning that at the time when I picked it when I was 17, I didn't really realize. I was just like, it's just a cool name. But yeah, it came from a Batman comic, and I've just been fortunate that actually it's been a handy word to have associated with me.
Nothing to do with you flying too close to the sun, then?
No, it's nothing cool like that. It's nothing like, oh, like I was reborn at some point. It's literally, it was a Batman comic, and I thought, that's a cool word. I'll use that.
Fair enough. If you're going to name yourself after someone, make it from a Batman comic.
Well, that's the thing. It's cool as well, isn't it? Like it's got the Z. It looks nice as well. So yeah, that's the whole reason for having it.
Strong name. So just for anybody, for everyone that's listening, we've already done like a bit of a preamble and a chat together, haven't we? Discussing sort of the usual COVID rigmarole, and we're not going to dig into that too much today, but kind of your background, your journey into the world of training, and obviously wrestling as well. What's that been like? Like when did that start?
So I've always been a fan of professional wrestling. For people that are listening that don't know what professional wrestling is, it's basically just men in tights slamming into each other, and it's basically a soap opera for men.
A bit like
we'll
American
all probably
football in that way.
Well, yeah. We'll all be familiar with like The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, those sort of names. I got into it when I was about 6 or 7. It's just always something that I've been engaged in and I've loved from a young age. I was reading a magazine one day when I was at 17, first year of college, and it was a show in Wakefield, and at the bottom of the advert was a bit that said that they had a training school. So I was like, cool, like I've got a ways of getting there. I've got a part-time job so I can pay for it. Let me go along. So I went along, and it's a warehouse, and it had a ring in it, and that was pretty much it. And it was dark and damp, and it was cold. But I was like, oh, this is professional wrestling. Here we go. And I did that first week. I went back the second week, and it just stemmed out of that. So I've been wrestling now for about 10 years, with a couple of breaks here and there. And that it's really been the driving force behind everything that I've done, from GCSEs and picking what I was going to do for GCSEs as how would that relate to wrestling, to go into uni purely to have 3 years just to do wrestling, to then getting into personal training because I'd found that I was really enjoying helping people at training, and I needed something that I could be in control of, like be my own boss in a way, and sort of still link into that fitness side of it. And I was enjoying being in the gym. So that's where personal training comes into it. So yeah, that's sort of my backstory as to where I've come from.
That's quite interesting, actually. So you pretty much had that inkling that everything you were going to do was going to be based around wrestling, to the point where you actually made GCSE choices off the back of it. What did you pick?
So I had drama because wrestling is acting. I had and I've always, people have that moment where they're like, oh, where they go, oh, and this happened, and then that's when I knew wrestling was fake, or like, for me, I've always sort of known it was never a thing of like, this is real. Even from a young age, I think I was pretty aware that it was staged. But yeah, so I had drama because it's acting. I had English because if I'm going to have to be writing promos and stuff like that, like I need to know how to write, which is also where I picked English for my A levels for the same reason. What else did I have? Media, because building a brand and trying to build a brand as a wrestler, I thought that would be helpful. IT skills for like a similar reason of like knowing how to use stuff. So it all had links. But the funny thing is that I didn't pick any sort of like sports or like physical education like that through GCSE or in the A level stuff. It was only once I started wrestling that I went, I need to look like a wrestler. I've always sort of been sporty, but I wouldn't say I was like a sporty kid. I played football for a good number of years. I played a bit of cricket, but I always enjoyed PE, but I wasn't one of the football kids. I was one of like the drama kids, like if you put it into brackets like that.
I think because how old are you?
I am 27.
Yeah, so me and you are about the same age, and I remember when we were going through school, it was always kind of like there was kind of like the kids that were good at football that could play, and then there was the rest, and there was always like a little, I don't know, probably a natural divide there.
Yeah, I always considered myself like on the cusp of that, in that like I could play, I had like athletic ability, and like I was okay on the pitch, but like football didn't consume my life like the football kids had. Like, and I enjoyed football, and like I collected football stickers and I played FIFA and all that sort of stuff. But for me, like it was always wrestling. Like that was the consuming bit. So I sort of fell into more of like a geeky group of people because that's the sort of stuff that I did. Which is why I never sort of sat as a football kid. But I think like from a different angle, I probably would have gone down that route. It's just that I almost went in a different way culturally in terms of what I enjoyed.
So then what did you end up picking at A level?
A level was English for the writing the promos. I had media again. I was looking at it like, okay, I enjoy doing media stuff, but there was always like, if I can put stuff together, if I can film, if I can't be a wrestler, maybe I can film wrestling, produce wrestling, be on the other side of the camera. So there was that, there was theatre studies, and then bizarrely sociology as well, just because I think I've always sort of enjoyed that, like, why are people like they are? But I dropped that after the first year and then just focused on the theatre studies, media studies, and English combined.
Yeah.
And then going into uni, it was broadcast journalism again, because I went, I'm going to be a wrestler. And at that point, I was pretty deep into wrestling. But if I can't do it, if for whatever reason that doesn't work right, can I film it? Can I report about it? Can I talk about it? Which actually, there's a lot of people now that make their living doing that on like YouTube and online and stuff. So that could have easily been me as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I suppose the thing I was going to try and pursue with that or dig at there was that, you know, you seem to have a pretty sound mind where you knew that even if you didn't get into like pro wrestling or you weren't going to be the one in the ring, like there was always, you know, if you focused your skills and your attention on the other areas that are involved in it and the other things that can be applied to wrestling, you were always going to have a career in the wrestling arena, weren't you?
I believe so. Yeah, I think I would have always found my way into it. So I think if it hadn't, and like I was reading the magazines because I was like, I just enjoy wrestling, and it just happened to be there. I think I would have always found myself training at some point. But like, if it hadn't have been that, and I would have pursued like the broadcast journalism stuff, I would have definitely. So again, I'll name, but there's a company called What Culture that have a wrestling division. Like that do YouTube stuff, an offshoot of that, or like some people that started there and started up their own company called Cultaholic, and there's lads that are doing really well by reporting about wrestling. So again, I think that'd have been a case of I'd have done broadcast journalism, and then I'd have gone, oh, I can do this, and like I know most of the lads, I know how they operate, and I could have easily seen it. So yeah, like there has always been a through line of like I will probably be involved in wrestling somehow.
Yeah. I mean, well, first off, your A-level choices made a lot more sense than mine did. I'm not going to get into that, but to say they were all over the place is an understatement. But I think, would you say you fairly fortunate in that you knew what you wanted to do from such a young age? Because it's not normal, is it, really, so to speak?
Yeah, like, I think, yes, I was fortunate in that I sort of had, and that wasn't like a big, if you'd have said to me at the time, like, why are you picking these things? Like, I wouldn't have been like, because I'm going to work in wrestling and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not really that sort of person, but like the underlying driving force was like, this is all probably going to come in handy at some point for wrestling. So yeah, I was fortunate in that I went, I'm going to work in wrestling, but then as a backup, I really like media. So if I end up working in radio, for example, I don't mind that too much. I found out through uni that I don't want to work in radio because it's a massive pain in the ass producing radio shows. But I knew that I sort of wanted to go down these directions. So yeah, I was fortunate in that I went, okay, I can see where I want to go with stuff. But there's a load of people. My brother, for example, we have a 9-year age gap between us. So he's just coming to the end of his like education career. And he was like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, he did a couple of bits and he's still sort of picking stuff. And I've said to him, that's fine because you've got your entire life to work out what you want to do. Yeah. I've just been very fortunate in that for whatever reason, pro wrestling has consumed my life to the point where I've dedicated my life to it. And that was just from a young age.
So I suppose, I mean, for you, it was more following a fascination and a bit of an inclination as to what you wanted to do, rather than, kind of going, right, well, here's my script, here's my blueprint, here's my life plan completely mapped out.
Oh yeah, there's been no, like, I wouldn't say it was like a plan as such. It was just, this is something that I'm interested in and I will go forward with that interest as much as I can do. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I've done pretty well with that so far. But I think a lot of that comes into who I am as a person, and that I am quite like, if stuff happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I can completely see why some people don't work like that, and they'd be like, hang on a minute, by this age you need to do this, and then you need to do this, and you need to do this. I will do whatever comes my way, and if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
And so what was it that really hooked you into wrestling in the first place? Was it the Men in Tights, or was it?
So for me, it was the larger than life aspect to it, and just this, like, it's almost like a movie happening in front of your eyes, in a sense. The best piece of wrestling media, probably the best piece of media that I have ever like seen, is The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, WrestleMania 17, but the hype package that has Limp Bizkit playing over it, My Way. If I ever watched that, and if I ever had to tell someone like what is pro wrestling, I would show them that 3-minute video, because that is just wrestling, and it's a story of two people fighting to determine who's the best person, but along with that is just a car crash and all this stuff that's going on around it, and bodies clashing, and that physical element to it that I never really got from anything else. I have a bit of a short attention span as well, in a sense. So for me, wrestling, where each match is like 10, 20, at the most 30 minutes, was something that I could consume. And then there's another thing that's consuming into it. Whereas I struggled with football to watch it for a long period. How people watch like 5-day test cricket, I don't know. Like, it's beyond me. But because wrestling was like such like short snippets of things, I was like, okay, cool, I can keep on with that. I'm not saying like I'm ADHD or anything like that. It just suited my taste better, really. Yeah. So yeah, like really for me, wrestling was it's just a story, and a physical story that gets told that I find a lot of enjoyment out of.
So what, I think we'll have to find that video and attach it to the show notes.
Oh, absolutely. Like, if you need to, I can send it across to you, because I know exactly where it is. But yeah, if people are listening to this and they've never watched wrestling, or like they haven't watched wrestling in years, and guarantee if you watch that video, like, it will make you want to watch that match, or at least go like, man, I want to go and watch some wrestling. It's just fantastic. I absolutely love it.
I'm going to say, because there is quite a lot of theatre and hype that surrounds it all. That I mean, I wasn't ever really into it as a kid. I think
I completely get it.
You know, my dad probably put me off it by going, "No, they're not really fighting." Right. But then, sort of, as I've grown up and become, I would say, wiser. If you start off at a pretty low level, it's not hard, is it? But you know, you become a bit more aware of or appreciative of the athletic qualities that go into it. And I think, you know, you said it's like physical drama and that combination of, I mean, you know, like when you see John Cena and Brock Lesnar and, you know, you're lifting guys who were probably 100 odd kilos above their head. And
I mean, if anybody's unsure about like the athletic potential that a wrestler has, or the amount of athleticism, sorry, I can't say that. The amount of like genetic potential that needs to happen for wrestling to operate on that top standard. Their performance center, they do like a combine day, and some of the freaks of nature that they have in that place is just unreal. Like what they're lifting, how far they're jumping, like the sprint times is just next level stuff. And a lot of my philosophies around training and where that whole sort of stems from comes from Joe DeFranco, who's like a very prominent like American trainer, and he's basically influenced all of the performance center. So where a lot of my philosophies around training comes from is also prevalent in the performance center as well. So for me, I look at what they do in the performance center and I go, I must be doing this right, because that's what they're doing at the top level. It's not like I'm doing like something and they're doing something completely different. They are doing the same stuff, only at like a way higher capacity than I am. But yeah, like I can completely get why people don't like it, because it is a weird concept of like pretending that it's real and it's not real. But then on the same side, like movies do that. Like movies exist in a world where what is happening is real, even though we know it's not real. It's just because it's presented in a live format in front of your eyes that you go, hang on a minute, like, is it real? Is it not real? And I think that can put people off, which I completely get. I would never say like everybody needs to like wrestling. It's not for everybody. Just like everything, like just like 5-day test cricket isn't for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say that now, like I am a fan, and you know, my appreciation of it over the last, I'd say probably 10 years, especially, well, from university really.
Yeah.
Has certainly grown and become a lot more. I think I actually managed to watch a bit of live wrestling at one point. I can't remember what it was. You know, it's different, isn't it? So
yeah,
what's the balance between the scripting of it and your creative license, like when you're in the ring 1-on-1 with someone, or you know, 2-on-1 in some cases?
So it depends really, and it depends on the circumstances. So say in England we have a show that you get booked on, that you go along and you're told, right, okay, this is your match, and this person is winning. So the person that is in charge of the overall show, in the same way that in like a theatre production, the director or the guy that's writing the script is saying this person is going to come out on top on this scene, if that makes sense in that essence. So basically we're told you two are wrestling and he is going to win, and they might have some things that they want to put in place to further storylines, but then for the most part that then comes down to you and that other person sitting down and going, okay, how do we want this match to go? Now that might be a case of you plan a lot going into it, so you might plan, we're going to do this and this and this and this and this, or you might go, what are we doing for the end of the match? How do we know where we need to get to? And then you just go out to the ring and you just wrestle in there, and like you call bits in the ring, or like you will know that someone is running in a certain direction and you need to do something to stop them. So it could go both ways, and it usually ends up as a mix of those bits where it's like, I'm going to do this move and then we'll see what ends up happening in the middle point, and then we need to get to here where you're going to do this move. So there's so much that goes into it. I don't mind talking about it because I actually think it makes people go like, oh, there's a lot that comes into this.
Yeah.
For example, when I'm wrestling, I need to think about 1, keeping myself safe, 2, keeping the other person safe, which is probably more important, 3, getting to the end of the match and getting to the finish point of who is going to win, 4, telling a compelling story of why people should be interested in this match, 6, making sure that story makes sense and that the crowd can follow it along. 7, making sure that the audience are having a good time and they aren't bored. Through that, I need to make sure that I'm connecting with the audience, looking at them, selling my emotion. I need to tell people that I'm hurt, even though I'm not hurt. I need to make sure that I can lift someone and slam them correctly at the end of a 10-minute match while looking like I'm gassed, while not being gassed, which is all art form of itself. While keeping to a certain time limit, because there's a certain amount of, you've only got so much time to tell. So I can't go half an hour if the match is only 10 minutes. So I need to make sure that my awareness of time is in the right place. And then I've got to make sure that I stay in character. So if my character is a certain personality type or does certain things, I need to make sure that I'm telling that story of who this character is, even though that might not be me in essence. There's a world of stuff that goes into it.
That's mad. So it is literally like, right, okay, this is going to be the result. Now you guys go off, figure out the rest, improvise, do what needs to be done.
Yeah, pretty much. In the same way, I think if to relate this to training, us as coaches, we will sit and put together a program and sessions in that program, and where do these exercises fit, and why does this one fit after this one, and how many reps and how many sets are they doing, what sort of rest time do they need, and we put in loads of stuff that comes into it. And then thinking as well, if we're in a gym, how can we move from this area to that area? Does that work? Is that going to be busy? Do we need to do something else? So we put a lot of time and effort into building these programs that when it comes to delivering the programs, we go, okay, we're going to do 3 sets of 10 on a lat pull down. And then from an outside point of view, you just watch it, you consume it for wrestling. Or if you are given the program, you go, okay, cool, I'm doing this. But the thought pattern through it and how that gets built has so much intricacy and detail to then be able to go, you're just doing this. Or for it to go, cool, I believe that this is real. So there's comparisons between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any ever any disagreement between like the wrestlers and the man in charge, so to speak, as to who gets to win? Do you ever have disagreements on that, or is it just fine, it's my job?
Sometimes. So sometimes it's not worth the battle out of it. I don't care if I win or lose. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Which is a weird thing.
Yeah, I was going to say this is probably where I have a really big problem with it, where I'd be like, oh, I don't want to lose. Don't want to lose.
For me, the art form is, it doesn't matter if I win or lose, because actually the end result doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Have the crowd enjoyed it? Have the crowd reacted to what I wanted them to react with? Have they followed the story that I'm telling them and that I'm feeding them? If I come away from that match and I go, that crowd was eating out the palm of my hand, I've won. If I come away from that match and go, that was awful, everything went to shit, the crowd didn't care, they turned off, they were looking at the phones, I've lost. So that's the competitive nature out of it. And sometimes you will say, actually, no, that doesn't work. Like, I shouldn't win, he should win, because that furthers a storyline this way. Or why is this happening this way? And then you'll have debates between wrestlers, because we all have his own philosophy. In the same way we're training, we could probably go back and forth on why would you program this and not this? At the end, it probably has the same result coming out of it, but we probably have a little bit of a different opinion on it. Happens with wrestlers as well. Yeah. Should we do this? No, actually, we should do this. Well, why would you do that? Why would you run off those ropes and not run off those ropes? So you can get into those debates that really, at the end of it, doesn't matter, because it's 10 reps.
And then, what do you see yourself? It's a bit like Maximus, Gladiator. Have you ever done that? Checking with the crowd. Are you not entertained?
Oh, yeah. Like, sorry, I'm back on with you now. Yeah, in a sense, but then rather than just being stood there and being like, you're not entertained, captivating the crowd and getting them to react to you can be done by doing that and actively engaging in a crowd. The better wrestlers don't have to do that, in a sense. Like, the better wrestlers can just keep an audience engaged by the wrestling that's going on. But absolutely, if you ever watch a British wrestling show, I can guarantee that someone stands in the ring at the beginning of the match and just starts clapping. And they start clapping because then the audience start clapping. And then they're like, haha, I've got them on side. A good wrestler doesn't need to clap to get the audience engaged. They're already engaged with him or her.
They just turn up and do the thing.
Yes.
So what's the wrestling scene like in the UK? Because, like, well, I don't necessarily imagine a lot of people might have necessarily heard about it in this country or gone out and got involved. I do know a couple of other guys who do it actually.
I will probably know them, like, for the most part.
Yeah, but what's sort of going on with it at the moment? Because I know you're involved in a couple of little different projects and things like that. So tell us a bit more about those.
So in terms of the British wrestling scene, much like everything at the moment, it's a bit on pause because of like being in a lockdown, and because of that, wrestling sits in a weird flux of like, it's not sport, but then also it's not really considered theatre and production, and like the training is probably more sport than it is theatre. So we're sort of trying to work out where we sit within guidelines of like, when can we start running shows again. For the most part, the British wrestling scene is a smaller scene. It isn't as big as the American one, in the same way that like American football in England isn't on the same scale as it is in America, obviously. But we have a division of the WWE in England called NXT UK, which a lot of people that I know are signed to on contracts and stuff like that. And for the most part, it's been a healthy scene. It's going through a change at the moment where there was a lot of stuff that came up during lockdown that needed to be addressed in terms of things like safeguarding and making sure people felt comfortable, and making sure people that who don't belong in the industry were no longer in the industry. In a similar way to, do you see that gymnastics documentary about the coach? I think it's like Athlete A or something like that. But anyway, there's a whole thing with like the gymnastics side where there was a coach that was basically abusing his power. There was more than, I mean, none is where you want to be, and there was more than none in British wrestling. So a lot of that has been sorted out, or is in the process of being sorted out and being flushed out. So we're currently on a rebuild, but basically I can guarantee if people listen to this and they're interested in going to a live show in England when shows can happen again, one, it's a really good thing to do because it's a great night out. But there will probably be one in your city centre within a month, I'd say. So we're there. We are under the bubble. It's just a lot of people see the WWE and then they don't see anything else under that. And why would they? Because they're not exposed to it.
Yeah. Just going back to what you said there, like I know there's been a bit of an inquiry about the FA, and you mentioned about the gymnasts, and I think there was a former USA gymnastics team doctor who was doing all kinds of horrendous things.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck is wrong with people?
I think it's an abuse of power, and this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people. I think when it comes to it, it's just been an abuse of power and being overly comfortable in a position where you're able to say, or the people are able to say, what are you going to do? Like, I'm in charge, so there isn't anything you can do. So for British wrestling, it needed lockdown to come around where there were no shows, where people felt comfortable enough to step forward and say, actually, this guy has done this to me, and he's up in this prominent position, to then take him out of that position and completely get him out of the industry. And I think we are at a point where we're starting to better that. So while it's had a rebuild coming out of it, I do think that we're going to end up in a far better position where it is far more equal across the board. Because I know a lot of females that have had these experiences, that have been abused, that have been harassed, that have been bullied, and it's just not on, and it's not fair in any regards. Mm-hmm. So it's changed for the better on that front.
I mean, I suppose it's just frustrating, isn't it? Like how you can, you need, well, automatically as a coach, if you're going to work with children or kids, you need a CRB check. So you need a certificate to tell you that you don't touch kids. The fact that is even required or necessary is beyond me. And then I envision the next thing that's going to come up will be some form of certificate or pass or whatever to tell to certify that you don't batter females. I mean, oh shit, man.
Yeah. As an example, for me going into, so basically we're starting up a training school in Sheffield, that's called Pursuit Pro Wrestling, and I am head coach there. So for me, I've done safeguarding courses. I've had to make sure that all the code of conduct stuff is up to date and appropriate. That it's very specifically stated, don't abuse anybody, don't harass anybody, don't bully anybody, and if you do, we're going to kick you out. But for too long, it's been basically a boys' club of like, nah, he's a good wrestler. It doesn't matter if he's a good wrestler. If he's not a good person, he doesn't belong in the industry. And I think, again, it's having those things in place. So then if something does happen, you have the appropriate reaction to be able to go, cool, we have this set in place to pull them out. Which, I mean, really, it shouldn't need to happen. But unfortunately, there's just dickheads in life.
You can say that again. I mean, I just like everything that you said there, it literally just comes down to just being a good human, doesn't it? And,
yeah, pretty much.
You know, I can't work out. People must have shit wired wrong or some serious issues in their own personal lives to be able to go out and, you know, kind of behave the way they do.
Yeah, there was an unfortunate amount of it within wrestling. And from a wrestling point of view, I think one of the reasons for that is wrestling builds this, especially in people that are in wrestling, it builds this feeling of a fake confidence. You are performing in ring and you are a character. And this character is loved by people or hated by people, but get us an emotional reaction out of it, which builds this sense of power almost, which then when people come into the industry, they look up to this power because, they're getting reactions and again, they are a good wrestler, which then builds this air of confidence and ego that shouldn't exist, but does exist. And I can imagine that happening in other industries where, because you are good at doing something, builds this ego, which then feels like that you can do anything that you want to do. And an extreme example, Jimmy Savile, and this, like, I'll sort of make this make sense. Jimmy Savile was up at a point where he was so highly regarded. He was in with the royal family. Like, he could do whatever he wanted to do. And he had, like, in essence, absolute power. If you can walk into Buckingham Palace through a back door and the person on the door be like, hey, Jimmy, how you doing? That's absolute power. And for him, he was like, well, I will do whatever I want to do, which involved doing some hideous things. But that's because he got up to a point where this ego and absolute power just ends up corrupting. And you could argue that that's always sat inside of him, or that always sat inside of him, which allowed him to go on and do what he did. I mean, that comes into like far more deeper psychological analysis of people.
It's almost like, well, I don't imagine they go from A to Z straight away. They'll start off with small gradual steps.
Yeah,
and obviously, I imagine in wrestling, it's, you know, it's all fairly close quarters. You probably quite often not wearing too much more than a pair of underpants.
Yeah. And then, you know, in some ways it's like, I mean, we did shows where we'd be getting changed in like a cupboard. And it's like, not only would you be like getting changed into like this tiny gear, like it's not like a dressing room. Like, it wasn't like, oh, look at all this space that we've got. It was literally like a 4x4 cupboard at some venues. So then that poses an issue and a risk. And especially if you've got females on the show, and especially if these females are just starting out and they don't really know the ins and outs of wrestling and they're still like working out who they are as a person, then suddenly like they're jammed into a box, or like spending hours in a car with people. It's a close environment, it's close quarters. And again, I think it breeds that mistrust that happens.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've gone around the right way in American football now in this country is we're getting good people in the right places, and you know, people without the ego and that kind of drive for power. It's more people who are love the sport, interested in the sport, want to promote the sport and progress it, and bring more good people through the system. And I think it needs more and more people like that, probably in every single walk of life, in order to eradicate the kind of shithouse behavior you do see on a frequent basis from multiple people.
Absolutely. Like, to touch on that in a way that, to bring it back to me. So say as an example for like the Super Wrestling stuff, one of the reasons why I wanted to do a head training position there was because I want to help the people in the Yorkshire area elevate upwards. for PTing and coaching, it was always about, I want to help people be the best out of it. Like, it's not about an ego point. I'm not being a head coach, so then I get booked everywhere because I'm the head coach. I'm the head coach because I want to go, here, book this person, put this person on your show. Let me take this person who doesn't know how to do a forward roll and let me get them running an entire match. Like, that's the fulfillment for me out of it.
So is that the next step for you? Is it kind of leveling up from just doing shows and being your own wrestler to actually, you know, putting other people in your position? And
yeah, pretty much. For me now, I see myself as like, I'm still wrestling. I'm going back into wrestling after a fairly decent break. So I'll be wrestling on shows, but for the most part, I see myself as a coach of how can I help people develop the skills, develop the talents? How can I teach them about wrestling? Like, I know a lot about wrestling. Like, I know a lot about the ins and the outs of the wrestling that I can help people then develop a character with, that then they can go forward and perform on shows and be good on shows. So that's really where I see myself now, is in that position.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I should have asked you this earlier, but that's a massive consideration, because you are deciding who you're going to play. Like, you get to choose your character, who you want to be, how you want to behave. You know, how much kind of thought and effort needs to go into that, and how much does it differ, or is it based on kind of reality and ideal self? Or like, do you ever feel like there's, you know, there are two completely separate characters, or are there crossovers between your character and the person you're portraying?
It varies from person to person, really. So on that front, the character that I am going back into wrestling in, and it's sort of what I finished off with, was very much just me as a wrestler. But for years, I was playing the part of a character who came out to We Like to Party by the Venga Boys, and I did a dance where I pointed my fingers. And anybody that knows me personally knows that I'm not a party person. Like, I don't drink, I don't go out to parties or anything like that. So for me to play that character was a complete departure of who I am. Like, I don't dance, but yet my character was a dancing person. And for some people, they are just an extension of themselves, just turned up to 11. But then for other people, wrestling is a chance to be someone completely different, to take an unconfident person and put a confident mask on it, so then they can be whoever they want to be. For me, wrestling is art. I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't dance. Like, artistically, I'm not particularly good, but I feel like I express myself through wrestling. I express my artistic ability in a wrestling ring. And I feel like a lot of people do that as well, where the character is their artistic flow and passion, in a sense.
So, and I know you mentioned how physical it is. Like, do you ever get tired during a match?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like, the art of like looking tired but not being tired is something that you have to get really good at. I have a good tank for wrestling. Like, I can go for a long while. But recently, as we've been building the school, like, we've had a ring and we've got in and done some stuff. I've added about 15 kilograms to my frame just over the lockdown, which, I mean, is some bad weight, but not all bad weight. It's just been, I've not had to get up at 5 a.m. every morning and be working until 8 p.m. So I've had that chance to rest and recover and all that sort of stuff. But with that extra weight on me, I've definitely felt like, okay, this is that little bit harder now. There's times where you wrestle, or times where I wrestle, where I don't break a sweat, where it's super easy and I could just go straight back out and do it again. But then there's other times where the intensity is picked up, or you're going faster, or you're doing more, where after the match, you like, I've just laid on the floor and been like, okay, I need 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes now.
So I know you mentioned there that you put on about 15 kilos of mixed weight. How much pressure is there on you or wrestlers in general to look a certain way?
Quite a big amount, in terms of when we look at athletic sports, when we just look at sports in general, the main focus, the priority is athletic ability, is being able to perform. For wrestling, you have to be able to perform, but then you also have to look like you can perform. And sometimes those two things don't match up. Like, as a general discourse with fitness and society, for the most part, people look at six-pack abs and they go, they're in shape, they're fit. But actually, we both know that just having abs doesn't mean that you are physically fit. Actually, you might not be very fit at all. You might just have a low body fat percentage. The bodybuilder on stage, while people would look at him and go, wow, he looks really strong. Actually, he's probably at his weakest point when he stood on stage, completely dehydrated, like flexing as hard as he can. But that perception of what fitness is comes into pro wrestling. So for me, when I'm programming for myself and for other people, I focus on performance in that I need people to be able to move, to be able to lift and be able to be safe and prevent injury. But then also I have to consider the hypertrophy element of I need them to look in shape, in quotation marks. Like, I need them to look physically big and have mass on their upper body and on the legs. So then people look at them and go, wow, they're in shape while also being able to perform. So it's I don't think there's much that has a similar position out of it. I think it's slightly changing now with like the UFC, where we're seeing different body types come into it, where it's not just stacked on the top and then tight on the inside. Like, the body of an athlete has changed, and I think that's very good for wrestling. But for the most part, I have to focus on performance and then looking good, in quotations.
Yeah. And I think the one thing everyone, I think, gets is like, look, you need to be able to perform. We need to lift weights. We need to do this. You know, you need to get stronger. You need to put on a bit more muscle. That conversation's easy. Like, how do you personally go around the conversation of, look, we need to manage your nutrition better. We need to drop a bit of body fat. We need to get your body weight down in a world where, I mean, you know, you go and say that to most people these days, or even in just in conversations, just go, oh, do you not think you should lose a bit of weight, kind of thing? Like, that's automatically fat shaming and you're offending someone. Or how do you go about having that conversation the right way with your athletes?
For me, I think I'm actually quite fortunate in that, for the most part, when people are ready to lose weight, that's when I have that conversation with them. Because really, wrestlers can be any shape or any size that they want to be. But for the most part, when I'm working with people, yes, they want to get stronger, yes, they want to get fitter. But then when it comes to like, okay, I need to lose some weight, they will usually make that approach first of like, okay, I want to drop some weight. And then that's when I go, cool, no worries, we'll get you into this and this and this. When I'm looking at managing like the nutrition and working with them in terms of the performance in the gym, I'm very much like, as long as we're eating well, as long as you're happy with how you're moving and how you're built, like, I'm good with that. When we want to make that change, that's when we'll make that change out of it. So again, I'm quite fortunate, and for the most part, when people come to me in a wrestling essence, they already sort of know the gym. They already sort of know where they're going about with it. They just need fine tuning into it. And with the fine tuning, then I come in and go, okay, cool, let's look at doing this, this, and this from it.
And is that them again being aware of their character, how they want to look, how they want to behave, how they want to act? And
yeah, and for the most part, it actually comes down to them as a person more than anything else. Of, do they feel good in their wrestling gear? Like, do they feel like they are in shape? For a lot of people, it's, can I wrestle a 15, 20-minute match? If I can do that, cool. And then everything else comes around the side of it, which is great for me, because then we focus on performance and we focus on how do we make sure that we're performing well. But yeah, for the most part, it becomes them as a person and how do they feel in their gear. The character usually fits around that as such.
So as a head trainer in whereabouts in Sheffield is the gym?
So we are 10 minutes outside of the city centre. We're on Effingham Street, which I believe, where do I drive into? Attercliffe, I believe, is where I drive into. I might have completely butchered that. I don't know Sheffield at all. We're 10 minutes outside the city centre and 10 minutes off of Meadow Hall as well. So we're in we're pretty city centre.
Yeah, I know it vaguely. from time living around there. So where can we watch you wrestle next? Where will you be?
So idea? I have a couple of places. Well, I have a place in Leeds that I wrestle, which is a company called Rise. I can't remember their handle off the top of my head, but if you search like Rise England, they usually come up. I'm in Newcastle quite a lot because like Newcastle for some reason is my second home. So there's a company called Prime Wrestling that I'm working for, and then there's another company called North Wrestling as well, and on Twitter they are North_NCL. But yeah, I'm up in Newcastle as well, and then in Sheffield we've got the school which is Pursue Pro Wrestling.
Where can people go to find out more, or simply get involved and give it a try? Like, what age would you recommend is, good age to get involved and get started?
So for us, what we're starting with is basically 16 plus out of it. I've had experience previously training, and I've taken a juniors class, and it needed way more refining than what was going on at that moment in time. And I believe that I love the fact that there are kids that want to pursue fitness within a wrestling context. It just needs to be done correctly, and it's such a hard thing to do. So at the moment, we're going 16 plus in terms of our training age. I'd say that's probably a good place for people to start, where physically the body's at a point where it can take the toll of like taking bumps and taking moves. But obviously, like, they're still young enough to learn and bits like that. But people can get started at any age, really. But the kids aspect of it, to develop kids as athletes, takes a whole another world of understanding that wrestling has taken for granted previously, where they're like, we're just going to run a kids class, jump off a crash mat. No, like, how are they moving around? Can they do push-ups? Can they do squats? Can they do rolls? Like, can they land safely before they even think about getting up on the top rope and jumping off of it? But that's all kids want to do. So then how do I go around coaching that? So yeah, I'd say 16 plus is where we're what we're doing in terms of training. In terms of where you can find us, Pursuit Pro Wrestling is the handle, and we're on Facebook and we're on Instagram as well. And we haven't yet started, just because we've been building this through lockdown, and we're going to have a beginners class thing that runs through it. So if people want to try it for the first time, that's an option there.
Get stuck in, folks. Get stuck in. Go on. I think I could have probably done with something like that as a kid. Give me and Chris the chance to play fight in a secure environment.
Yeah, like I think kids love it. Kids love wrestling. I loved wrestling, and I would love to be able to provide that. I need to work out how do we make it work correctly, where it isn't just kids kicking lumps out of each other, and it's done in a constructive and positive way.
Yeah. So will that be the next step?
Yeah, most likely. We sort of have, me and Nathan, the guy that is also running it, have a vision of where we're moving forward with it. So there probably is a kids class that is going to happen at some point. It's just a case of setting the stuff in motion first, getting the classes up and ready, and making sure that they're ticking off and they're going. And then once we're comfortable, okay, how do we run a kids class?
Yeah, that's wicked. That's wicked. Hopefully you can get that going and get loads of kids involved doing it, because obviously it's going to encourage some fundamental lifestyle gymnastic ability.
Absolutely.
As well as sort of physical strength, movement coordination, and as well as just being good fun.
The amount of people that can't roll when they come to wrestling is frightening. And if I can help kids learn how to roll, then that's perfect. I'm providing for the next generation on that, I feel.
Yeah. No, that'd be class. That would be absolutely outstanding. My last question specifically on the wrestling front is on the wrestling circuit, is there any kind of like big rivalries? Is there any bad blood, like genuinely bad blood between wrestlers? Like, I know you might portray that you hate someone in the ring, but is there anyone where that actually extends outside of that?
I mean, in all walks of life, there's people that really dislike each other. The funny thing is, though, that you won't typically see them in the ring against each other. The people that have like the hardest hitting matches and like are in the blood feuds are usually really good mates. because it takes a certain thing to be like, okay, I'm going to let you punch me as hard as you can, and then you're going to let me punch you as hard as I can, and then I'm going to hit you with a chair, and you're going to be completely fine with that. So to have that level of trust with people builds like a friendship, really. And some of my best mates are people that I've probably kicked too hard in the head a couple of times. When people have like actual, like, I really don't like that person, they tend not to go near each other at all, which is probably best, because I've seen when wrestling dissolves into actual fights, and it's rubbish. Like, nobody gets anything out of it. Everybody looks like an idiot, and the crowd hate it. So it's best when people are left apart.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I suppose, in terms of like hatred and rivalry against one another, like there has to be a level of, you were saying at the start of the show, that there has to be a level of trust there between the two guys in the ring, or two ladies in the ring, to to be able to interact and work with each other, doesn't there?
There has to be the trust that you need to go, yeah, of course you can hold me upside down. Like a suplex, for example, you pick the person up and they are literally upside down, and if you let go of them, they are going head first onto the floor. To have that trust with someone requires building a rapport and getting to know that person, and just going, I trust you, you trust me, we can work together.
Yeah. And I know I asked you about life skills as well, and and then obviously, of course, you just raised the issue of certain implements that you can hit people with, like chairs, etc. What's your favorite implement of choice to cause destruction to someone in such a fashion?
Good question. So a while back, when I was first sort of starting out, I ended up doing a teabag death match, where, okay, so there's a company in America called CZW, and CZW do death matches, and basically that's like a hardcore match, but like put onto like the extreme level. So we're talking like barbed wire and all that, and glass and all that sort of stuff. CZW came over to England, and they were working with a company that I was working with at the time called Tidal Championship Wrestling. So we had like a combo show, and on this show there was no death matches for a CZW show. So I pitched, at the time I was doing this gimmick of like, I have a flask and like I like tea, which is not the most engaging wrestling character in the world, but people were enjoying it. So I'd pitched, let's do a teabag death match where I use like a teapot and teacups, and the big finish of it was I pulled a bag from under the ring, I came into the ring, and I poured the bag out, and instead of it being like drawing pins that it usually is, it was just a bunch of tea bags. And then I slammed the guy into the tea bags, and he was like, oh no, that really hurt, and I pinned him, and everybody enjoyed it. So yeah, my implement of choice, probably a tea bag.
See, when you originally said teabag deathmatch, I had something else in mind.
So that's where it started. So I'm assuming the thing that you've got in mind is actually where it started from, where there was a Scottish guy who used a tea bag or teabagging as like a move that he did. So I, at the time being the party character, was like, I don't really understand what teabagging is. I'm assuming it's Scottish for tea party. So let's have a tea party. So that's where it sort of stemmed out of. So yeah, a bizarre link into it, where a man's scrotum ends up being a teabag death match.
He had to be Scottish as well, didn't he?
Had to be Scottish.
Oh dear. So anyway, obviously, how long have you been a PT for as well now?
So when did I start? Probably 2015. I think this year's completely wiped my, about 5 years, I'd say. And then I had a year at an independent gym where the wrestling training took place. And then after a year of that, I moved to Total Fitness and joined ProFit, and I was there for 4 years, or I'm there for 4 years.
I was going to say, so this past year that's gone, that doesn't count. That's
not really
written from the records of history. Much to the displeasure of Liverpool fans. Sorry, but no one gives a shit. You didn't win the league. No one remembers it. It doesn't count. So how do you find sort of like the health and fitness industry as a whole?
It's a debate that I have with myself, where I can see both sides to it. I think the discourse of health and fitness could probably do with a change, in essence, of it needs to be more about how do you feel inside yourself, and physically, how do you feel? And if we're being completely honest, having a good health system set in place for yourself, a good healthy routine, is probably far more beneficial than people give on. And as a society and as a culture, we could probably do with more of that. But when it comes to, unfortunately, selling a product and capitalism, then I can see why the health and fitness industry is the way it is. I can see why people use Instagram to go, look at me, I've got an 8-pack, which means that you should buy my supplements. And look at my ass, you should buy my program, and then you'll have an ass like me. And I don't agree. I don't agree with those things. I don't think that's the way that people should operate, and I think it doesn't build a healthy mindset with the body. But from a societal point of view, I understand why that stuff happens. And what I wish was that people could also take that approach to it, where as they're scrolling through Instagram, because when we think health and fitness industry, I think all of us now just go to social media. So when we're looking at that, or if we're looking at stuff on TV or the internet and we scroll through it and we go, they're selling me a product, I wish people could take that as they're selling me a product. So they look like this because they are trying to trigger an emotion from me. But too often people are like, oh, they're selling me a product and I should look like that because they look like that. And that's what's deemed as like worthy out of it.
I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've got to say, I think if I did like a 12-week booty builder, I think I'd be absolutely rolling in it.
I would agree, mate. I think you would be. Might be the way to go. But yeah, like again, we understand it, and we get that it comes far more than that. And I'd never tell anybody to like, you need to stop doing this. Like, I understand why they are selling themselves like that, or why they are selling a product. Now, if it's dangerous to a person, it's going to kill a person. If you're just giving them chemicals, I don't agree with that. And I think that should be wiped out. And giving someone a tea that makes them shit themselves probably isn't the best product to have. But when people are using a platform to be like, here, look at my body and you can be me too, I don't agree with it, but I can see the logic behind it. And what I would hope is that people would go through that. They go, hang on a minute, I don't look like this person. Why is that? Let me do some more digging. And that's where people like us come into play, where we are posting our content that people then find and go, oh, this makes sense.
So I was going to, what kind of questions should people be asking themselves when they're scrolling through social media?
I think the question should always be, or the prevalent thought that is in someone's mind should be, this is a highlight reel. Everything that we post on social media as a person, we are posting as, this is my best self. Our social media is a photo album that we allow everybody to see. In our photo album, we're probably not going to put our worst days. We're probably going to put our best days. But then we also need to recognize that everybody is doing that. Or if they're not doing that, they are using it as an advertising platform to get you to buy a product. So then on that, when you're having a bad day as a person scrolling through social media, you also need to recognize that they are putting their best selves onto social media, or they are trying to sell you a product. And it's not, they are a good person, I am a bad person. It is, this is the person that they are presenting today. Because we all present a persona on social media. We all do it, whether it's you, me, my mum, we're all presenting an aspect of our personality, which is fine. That's what it's there for. That's what it does. But we need to remember that everybody else is doing that. And again, it doesn't come down to good person, bad person. It comes down to, I am me. This is my photo album. They are them. That is their photo album, is the way that I try and look at social media. I get caught on that stuff too. I look at it sometimes and I'm like, they're in fantastic shape. And I'm not. And I'm sat here like a blob. But then I then have to go, hang on a minute. That's a great angle that they've used there. Or hang on a minute, they've used Photoshop to make their arm look bigger. I saw that the other day, that someone had posted a picture with the child, and I looked at his arm and I'm like, his arm is massive. And then I saw another picture of it and I was like, hang on a minute, his arm isn't that big. And he buffed out his arm. want a picture of with his kid? What's the point? But again, that's just social media for you. He wanted to present himself looking bigger than he is.
That's terrible, isn't it?
Honestly, I couldn't get my head around it.
I think, I mean, I know you mentioned about it being a highlight reel. I don't think I have that many highlights. I don't really post on it that much. I clearly just live a very boring, secluded life.
Well, it depends. Like, you will have highlights that you have in your life. It's just how much do we put in that photo album? And unlike a regular photo album where only you would look through it, now we have this photo album that everybody can look through. If I didn't work in this industry that we work in, and if I wasn't a wrestler, if I had a 9-to-5 job where I worked in an office and didn't have to, because again, like, I'm on social media because I am selling a product. I am selling online training to people that are involved in wrestling. That's what I'm on social media for. If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't post anything because I wouldn't feel a need to post anything.
Yeah, I think I've frequently had that same conversation with a few people, actually.
But then I think we almost need to keep posting things because we have knowledge, we have information. You have a world of knowledge and information that is worth putting out there. But then it becomes this game of like, we have this information, but sometimes it goes unnoticed because it's easier to like a picture of a girl that's got a bum out or a guy that's got his abs out. And it feels like, what am I posting it for? But someone will find it and appreciate it and probably get something out of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think probably over the years, I've put a lot of information out there, and quite often the useful stuff, the very valuable stuff, will get no attention.
Yeah.
I remember doing one video actually with one of the members of staff at TF where we were simply putting weights away, and I think it got like 60,000 views or something like that.
Yeah.
Even more than that. And I just thought, that's just ridiculous. Like, why are people watching that? Like, it's...
Yeah. But then if that comes to a point of they see that video, which then they click on your profile and read through stuff, they might not even engage with what that content is. And I do it. I look through stuff, I read stuff, and I go, that's really interesting. But I don't like on it, I don't comment it, but I've still taken that in. And again, that's something that I need to recognize in myself because I'm useless at doing this, and I go, can't be bothered posting. But people are reading stuff, and the more information that we put out there and the better perspective that we put on stuff, the more that information is out there, and then hopefully we make a change within a health and fitness industry.
Yeah. I think one of the other changes that comes to my mind is sort of, well, with being in a pandemic where health is kind of at a critical level across the population. I remember seeing something the other day. There was, I think it was a comment on a post that this woman kind of said there were almost made it as if there were only two possible body types. It was either a beer belly, grossly overweight and obese, whatever it was. Apologies if the word grossly overweight offended anybody, but that's how I'm going to term it. Or a beanpole. And, you know, I think she was kind of getting across the point of life's for living. I'd rather, you know, have someone who's like massive chunky monkey rather than someone that spends like 10 hours a week in the gym. And there were a few things that came to my mind when reading it. I think the first one was, well, if life's for living, then why don't you just go and live it? Like, why are you spending it on the behaviors that you have? Either sat in front of the telly, getting boozy, like not burning any energy, not doing anything exciting, not physically using your body and engaging your body in activities. Why are you doing that? And then the second thing, which is the thing I really want you to go into and give me your thoughts on, is like, if you think it takes 10 hours a week to be of a reasonable, healthy body type, and that's not worth it, how misguided are you in that sense?
Yeah. Like, on that front, again, I think it comes to this discourse of like what people perceive as fitness and what people perceive as health and what they have to do to achieve health. Because really, and we know it, and we've seen it in people, actually, it takes getting down to the gym a couple of times a week, if you wanted to do that, or just doing some physical activity a couple of times a week, probably going out for walks and just generally being a bit more active in your life and taking a bit more interest in what you're eating and actively thinking, I should probably eat like some more fruit and veg and get some more protein in. And if you're doing those things, then actually that's a way easier way of living a normal average life. And there's nothing wrong with being average. Average is absolutely spot on. And actually, if we were all average, that'd be excellent, because then a lot of health problems wouldn't exist. But we see the polarizing extremes out of it. And we see people that are super, super fit. And then we see people that are super, super skinny and super, super big. And then it feels like you've got to be one of those camps, when actually you have to do a bit, but nothing that should be particularly distracting from your life already, to be at a point where you are healthy. And I think there's a difference between being healthy and being at an extreme. And if more people could focus on being healthy, the problem with that is it's not glamorous. Like, being average doesn't get any likes when we're looking at it. It doesn't get any attention. But what does get attention, people that are doing 50 million burpees and being in ridiculous shape, or people that are super, super skinny, or people that are super big saying that everybody should be this big. Like, being average doesn't get likes, but it should do, because then a lot of the problems that we see within society around health wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. I'm pretty sure I went on track there.
No, I think so. I think the point where it really kind of irritated me was more just the glorification around being at such a size.
Yeah.
Or being like, kind of presenting and promoting that as a healthy image. And
I think a lot of it comes into power. And this is a problem across society, is that it's power. So to go back to wrestling, the people that were bad people that were in places of power that they shouldn't have been in power were there because they had that power, and you couldn't take that power away from them. They held that. And I think everybody's looking to be in power. So these people that are bigger, that and then glorify being bigger and actually go out of their way to become bigger, then try and take power of, I'm this way and everybody should be this way, and you're wrong if you're not this way, because I'm right and I have the power. And that's probably because they've been told for years, like, you probably shouldn't be this big. So they almost want to take that for themselves and regain power. Is that the smart option to do? No. Because we have a way of living healthily, and we have a way of living that will fight off disease, and really being at that end of the extreme is more likely to have disease. It's studied, like, there is scientific research that proves that. But for them to take that power back gives them that sense of, I'm right. Because let's be honest, we all want to be right. Nobody likes being wrong. Like, we all want to feel like we're right. So if you can change that narrative to suit it where you are right, or they change the narrative to suit it where they are right, I think that's the reason why this glorification of obesity has happened. Because, I mean, really, as a prime example out of it, and this is an odd segue into it, but Donald Trump, where he first came into power and there was something, and one of his representatives basically said, like, oh, well, we have alternate facts. And at that point, it was like, so now facts and truth don't really matter, because there are alternate facts that prove something else. And again, it's how people say, I'm right. And that doesn't necessarily line up with this is true.
I think that's a man of wisdom speaking there. I think, because I've spoken about this with other coaches as well, where it's the difference between allowing someone and questioning someone to kind of sift through their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, versus imparting your own and telling them that this is the way you're going to live, kind of thing, which I see a lot of, unfortunately, when I do come across any sort of body positivity coaches who are kind of promoting, the it's okay to be fat kind of thing, or like, you shouldn't need to lose weight. You shouldn't feel like you need to lose weight. And then if you do, that's it. You're kicked out of their community. Like, that's it. You're done because you don't believe. I think it's important to associate with people who believe what you believe, but you shouldn't be forcing people into doing it. And I think the same way I think we need to add on to this is that, the opposite end of the scale,
Absolutely.
anorexia, being incredibly skinny, underweight, and, again, unhealthy. Health sits somewhere in between the two. And a little bit like the lass who said, I'd rather have someone who's got a big beer belly than a beanpole. Well, there's more than two body types. You don't have to be a beanpole, and you don't have to be, excessively overweight. Like, that, you can fit anywhere you want within the spectrum. But I suppose the point is, you have to ask the questions that allow someone to figure themselves out, rather than you going, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. I think more people probably need to question what it is that they believe and what it is that they hold true to themselves. The problem with that is that it takes a lot of thought, and sometimes, and for a lot of people, that energy just isn't there. In a society that we live in, where work pretty much, especially now, where work is just you at home and it never seems to end, and then like the media is just throwing things at you, that then takes more energy to be able to sit and really think about, who am I as a person? What do I want out of life? What do I believe in? Is a lot of energy. So like, I mean, I'd never blame anybody for not thinking it. I believe that I think almost too deeply about stuff and end up fucking tracking around myself. But if more people could have that time to think about life and think about, how do we actually survive and how do we actually live, I think we'd be in a better place. I think, though, that life is designed to not allow people to do that, because if more people did that, I believe that the planet would be in a completely different state than it is at this moment in time. We're going way beyond health and fitness here, and we're going way into like the deep, like, psychological mindset of society. But
mate, let's do it. I've got my waders on. Let's go in.
So on that front, I think a lot of the stuff that is happening at the moment, across the board, in terms of division between man and woman, and we're looking at race, and then we're looking at the health and fitness society, which is, or the health and fitness spectrum, which is like, it's super skinny, or you're super big, or like you're super fit. It's all designed to be polarizing, and social media and the way that media is consumed now is all polarizing, and it's all look over there, look left, look right, because they don't want you to look up. Because when you look up and you suddenly go, well, hang on a minute, me and my next door neighbor are actually in the same boat here. The people that are above us are the ones that are actually different, that hold the power that actually we can't get to. But in order to stop that happening, it's way easier and it's way more beneficial to be like, look to your left, look to your right, look how different they are. I mean, like, that's really what I feel like it comes into, is let's divide everybody so then nobody can come together and have power.
Do you know what? That's really interesting, because just before we came onto the podcast today, I was watching. I think it was like a German. I don't know whether I call it a psychological experiment, but it was a really good representation of society and the way that we think, the way we feel about certain groups, certain people. And what they did was they had, let's say about 100 people. They gathered them together, and then each group of people had their own square. So everybody who was of that same group, let's say it was like teenagers, nurses, police officers, lawyers, pensioners, etc., like they all had their own square, where you looked at them and you thought they fit in that group, and you kind of stereotype about personalities and things. And then they basically said at the start of the experiment, they go, we're going to ask you a series of questions. Some of them are going to be quite personal. Some of them are going to be, possibly quite hard to maybe admit to openly. And they were like, look, as long as you're happy with that, please stay here and continue with this experiment. If not, then, feel free to go and not participate, kind of thing. And it was quite interesting because they just asked a series of questions. It's like, right, who's a parent? Who's a step parent? Who's straight? Who's gay? Who's bisexual? Who's done X, Y, or Z? And every single time you got a mix of and questions like, who feels lonely? Who feels depressed? Who feels down on a rate? And every single time you got a completely different mix of people coming from every single group, every single walk of life to kind of mingle and mix together. So I suppose you do, don't you? You have to be very, very careful about how you initially perceive someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Because really, we're all in the same boat. Like, everybody has problems, everybody has stuff that they deal with in their lives. But for the powers that be, like, it's very, very easy to divide. And actually, as a society, as people, we need to recognize that yes, there are differences, but there are also similarities within people. And if we could all sort of recognize that a little bit more, I think the world would be in a better place overall as well. I mean, I'm saying this, I don't know what the solution would be if it changed. Like, that is not something that I have the knowledge or the thought power to be able to comprehend. I do know, though, that the reason for divide is to keep people set on a line, and actually we're all far more similar than I think most of us would like to admit.
Yeah, and I think you seem very well in tune with that. Is there a way that you implement that kind of thinking into your daily life? Like, do you take time to sit down, meditate, think it through? Do you?
No, I mean, I suppose, like, I don't meditate as like this is a set time to meditate or anything like that. I just feel like I've always been very inquisitive, and I've always like questioned myself and sort of then question myself again. And I have conversations in my head of like, well, if there's this, but then what about that? And then what about this? And I think that's just always something that has been within me from like a young age. I sort of, I'm quite, I have a lot of empathy for people, and I have quite a good understanding of people, and I can empathize with a lot of people. And I actually think that comes from spending a lot of time with my grandmother growing up at a young age, where I sort of took on her kindness from it, which I was extremely fortunate that I had that. And I know a lot of people don't have that. But for me, that was taking a lot of kindness from her and a lot of watching how she lived her life to then go, right, if I can live my life like that and be a good person, in essence, of trying to understand people as to why are they ticking like they're ticking. So I don't necessarily set time aside for it. I don't journal or anything like that. I just try and take a moment to go, how are they feeling today, and not take a first assumption on people. I do it all the time. Like, I will make a snap decision on someone because that's how the brain works. It works on that essence. That's why stereotypes exist. But then we also need to go, okay, that's the stereotype that I put in place. Is that true? And sort of find the rationale behind it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting concept because the brain automatically takes shortcuts. It automatically wants to, just because it's faster, it's slicker, it's pattern recognition.
Absolutely.
And then it's a case of, well, can you break the pattern? Can you make your initial judgment and then evaluate it and analyze it and, kind of come to a different, more understanding conclusion around an individual? The other thing that I think you said there, that, as young men, I'm fairly confident young people take this for granted 100% of the time, in terms of respect your elders kind of thing. But, spend time around your grandparents, because, I mean, at times like this, when we think we've got it tough, when we're sat at home most people, not us because we're self-employed, but most people sat at home on furlough, with Sky TV, internet, home delivery for food, and we think we've got it tough. We've got mobile phones, games we can play all the time. We can stay occupied, and entertained very loosely, because I don't think that's necessarily a definition of entertainment in my book, but we've got ways that we can keep busy. Like, we think we've got it tough. Go and speak to your grandparents or great grandparents if you're fortunate for them to still be around. And I mean, they've seen shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and again, it's, I think, as we've developed as a society and as we've had more information given to us and more access to information and the quickness out of information, I think we lose that ability to recognize that kindness and to recognize where we have been previously. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's a definite element that we as young people miss out on from a generation and a generation before that that have done it and seen it and had harder times out of it. And I also think it's important to recognize that, yeah, it's a shitty situation. I've been sat at home for weeks on end, but I've got a home. Like, I have food in the fridge. Like, I'm warm. I'm sat by a radiator that works. I could be in a far, far worse position than I am. And that's not to detract from people that have that and then suffer from depression around it, because I can completely see why that would be depressing, because we've been conditioned to a way of life that then has been taken away from us. I was speaking to some people the other day where 2 of his friends over this lockdown period have committed suicide. That's awful. That is such an awful position for them to be in, that it came to that. And I'm fortunate that I have, I don't know, like, I wouldn't say the mental capacity that my brain is healthy enough, I guess, if that's the right way of saying it, that I don't suffer from depression. But again, that it's different for everybody. And as people, we need to make sure that we are empathetic to everybody that's going through things.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think everyone's situation is very different, isn't it? I think it's. I mean, this at the minute for me, that it's devastating that young people are ending their own lives.
Yeah,
because of the current situation and circumstances. I think it shouldn't happen, should it? At any point. And
I almost think that now, I don't know whether it's more recognised now, which is good in a sense, and it wasn't recognised previously, or it's just a case of the amount of stuff that we have got around us almost numbs the brain in a sense, whereas previous generations before it wasn't allowed, but it wasn't as much as a factor. But I don't know enough about it to really say, oh, there was less depression and suicide back in the day. They might have been exactly the same. There might have been more. I don't know that, but I do feel like now we are in a society that is almost numbing in a sense, and I think that's a dangerous place for the brain to go.
I mean, going back to our chat about social media and like scrolling through Instagram, I think it's really easy to devalue yourself.
Yes.
Like, when you say you're looking through everyone's highlight reels and you think, oh, I ain't got that, mm-hmm. I don't look like that, I can't do that. You kind of scrolling down and you're kind of chipping away at your own self-worth, comparing yourself to people who are, promoting very much the very best of themselves.
Yeah.
And, you can't be expected to feel 10 out of 10 all the time, but if you're actively doing things that are going to make you feel worse or cause you to, I would say essentially cause you to vibrate at a lower frequency.
Yeah.
And, have less energy and feel like you've got less aptitude and vigor and, get-go about yourself, you're going to get worse results. And, ultimately then it's a bit of a downward spiral, isn't it? If that becomes a habit and you start to tune in with that, then that's far less productive than, I guess, waking up, getting your running shoes on, going out for a walk.
Yeah.
Spending 40 minutes out in daylight before anything else really kicks off through the day. And, well, finding time to use your body, get moving, and like kind of term it like, contribute to your own private wins, things that no one really sees. They don't go on a highlight reel, but they all add up, don't they?
Absolutely. And again, when it comes down to it, like when everything when everything ends and when life comes to an end, you're not going to look back over it and go, man, do you remember that post that got like 50 likes? Like, nobody's ever going to think about that. They're going to think about the physical things that they did. And I think that's important to recognize on that front as well. Like, those little things that you can do to get you up and get you through the day and make a change to yourself and look after yourself, then allows you to do far more in life. And you will recognize the things that you've done physically way more than you will ever think about stuff that you've done virtually.
Yeah. Physical experience is 100% the way to go. Yeah. I can't believe we pretty much burned through an hour and a half, but before we go, I know we're getting close. We're getting very, very close to lockdown being lifted, hopefully for the last time. I doubt it, but hopefully for the last time. What are you most looking forward to being able to go and do?
I suppose from a wrestling point of view, it's going to be nice to be able to go and wrestle back on the show again. To be able to step out in front of a crowd that aren't having to be cautious about how close they are to people, that they can be in an environment where they can laugh and clap and get involved and interact with something. And to be able to wrestle someone, in essence, that's really what I'm looking forward to on it. And then on a more personal side out of it, so I've got a daughter that I have pretty much every other weekend. It's going to be nice once everything does come to an end that I can take her out places, that we can go to like a zoo, or like I can go round to my mum's house and she can spend more time like with her grandma and all that sort of stuff, that we've just not really been able to do. And to be able to do that comfortably and to be able to do that without like a fear of like, is there something more under this, that like, it's going to be nice just to have that ability to not have that added stress on life. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I hope it comes around fairly soon, and I'm sure it'll be every moment it will be worth it eventually when we do get there. So it's been awesome talking to you today, man. It's been thoroughly enjoyable on my part.
No, absolutely. I've enjoyed talking. Again, it's absolutely flown by. I don't know how that's happened.
Where can people find you to follow you on, like Instagram? I know that's probably where you're most.
Yeah, pretty much. So I am on Instagram at Lazarus_PT. Lazarus is LARAZUS. Spell that correctly, I think. So yeah, Lazarus_PT. And then I'm also on YouTube as well, which is Lazarus Personal Training, where I post stuff about wrestling and about fitness as well.
So, well, I'll make sure I put your links in the show notes for the podcast anyway. So if people can't find you, they will be able to by clicking on those. But yeah, thank you again for your time, my man, and all the best.
No worries. Thank you.
So, ladies and gents, that concludes episode 31 with Liam Slater. Hopefully you've picked up a few good little tips in there. Obviously, a lot about Liam's background and the world of wrestling in the UK. Who would have thought it? So if you do want to know where you can find Liam, or you want to get involved in any of the projects that he's doing, or even go and see some of the shows when we're allowed to go and do that kind of thing, I'll make sure I put the links in the show notes to this episode. So make sure you check that out. If you've got any other questions, anything you would like to hear from me, anything you want me and Chris to discuss and talk about in future episodes, drop me a message, drop me an email, get in touch, and we'll make sure we sort you out. So until next time, take care of yourselves, stay fit, stay healthy, stay strong, keep on moving. See you later, guys.